So one of the comments I got was from someone wanting to learn how to float gears better, or at least float gears. They were having trouble with it. So I'm going to show you how I float gears. So anyway, clutch down, clutch down on the brake, and I start off loaded. I start off in second gear. So let off fuel. One thing that can help you when, especially with floating up, is as soon as you let off the fuel, like if you have tension against the gear, so much traffic. But if you have tension against the gear or against the stick, like say pulling it out of gear, when you're upshifting, as soon as you let off the fuel, it'll easily pull out of gear. I'll show you. I'm gonna shift kind of quick. On the lower gears, you have a lot less time to make your shift. Gear to gear. One of the biggest tips I can offer for upshifting is just as soon as you take off or take your foot off the fuel, pull it out of gear. You don't have to rip it out of gear. It'll come out pretty easily on its own as soon as you let off fuel, because it's gonna release tension from the engine for just a slight amount. And when I downshift, I go over, once the RPMs have dropped, I downshift, I go over, I tap the fuel just a slight amount. Just a slight amount. And when you tap the, or when I tap the fuel, that's whenever I can, like, I don't know how to put it. I tap the fuel, as soon as I let off, I can pull it out of gear to downshift. And as soon as I pull it out of gear, give it fuel to raise the RPMs, and then it kind of sinks into gear or into the next gear, as long as you do it right. Downshift whenever I make this turn. Alright, slow down. Just barely tap it. Barely tap the fuel, comes out of gear. Go over to the gear you want to go in. As I'm moving the stick over, I rev the engine up, put it into gear. Take it out, goes right into gear. You don't have to force it into gear. What I do is I'll just put the shifter up against where the gear is going to go, or where it's going to go into gear. Put the shifter up against, like it did for 7th gear. Put the shifter up against it, and when the RPMs are right, it'll just go in on its own. You don't have to give it a whole lot of force or anything. Stopping at railroad tracks. In my opinion, floating down is a lot harder than floating up. Floating up is just taking it out of gear, putting it next to the, or in front of the gear that you want to go into, and it kind of just goes in on its own. rev the engine up to what the RPM should be for the gear you're going in at the speed you're going, and then it should go into gear. For instance, if I'm downshifting into a gear, and at the speed I'm going, if I need to be at 1500 RPM, then I need to rev the engine up to about 1600. Because we rev it up, and then the RPMs are going to kind of fall a little bit, and that's when it's going to go into gear. Is as the RPMs are coming down, it'll sink into gear. Shift up, getting it out of gear. It didn't want to get out of gear, so if you give it just a little bit of fuel, just tap it, it can sometimes like easily help her get it out of gear. In like a 1-2 step. Think of it like dancing. I don't know how to dance, but I know how to shift gears. But when you put it into neutral, you want to hesitate just a little bit. Just move it on over to the next gear. You don't want to just take it out and slam it over to the next one. That going from 9 to 10. Go too fast, you'll grind up against the gear. So it's more pull it out of gear and just almost just take your time going to the net or going into 10th gear, because going from 9th to 10th on a 10 speed like this, the RPMs are going to drop a lot. I wouldn't say really slower. You just don't have to move it as fast as you do on the lower gears. And then when we go over the bridge, I'll downshift from 9th to 8th, and I'll show you kind of what I do for downshifting going uphill with floating. I wish I could put a camera on the floor, like that way you can see just how much fuel I'm giving it whenever I like go over and tap the fuel whenever I'm downshifting. But I don't have a third. I need to get like a third GoPro, I guess. That my phone video is going to be horrible. What I'll do when I'm going up the bridge, I'll wait till the RPMs get to about maybe 1,000 to 1,100. And as soon as I let off the fuel, it'll come out of gear, and you just give it a quick stab of the fuel, like stab the fuel pedal just slightly. All you want to do is bump up the RPMs just a little bit, and it should sink into the next gear. So I'm going to go from 9th to 8th. RPMs jump right up. Shifting in general is just knowing what speed you need to be at for what gear you want to go into. A 10 speed, in my opinion, a 10 speed is fairly easy to learn on. It's very straightforward as far as you don't have to, you don't have any gears to split. Almost messed that one up. And one thing I do is as I'm coming to a stop, I kind of put it up against, like I wanted to go into second gear. So I'm pushing the shifter up against second gear, and as I'm slowing down, it'll sink into gear. As soon as it sinks into gear, that's when I push the clutch down. And I'm not pushing the clutch all the way down to where I get into the clutch brake. You just push it in enough to where it releases, it takes the tension from the engine off the transmission. Messed up that dump sheet. I revved it up too high going into 7th. So trying to downshift real quick, gave it too much fuel, revved it too high whenever I went into 7th, so it kind of clunked into gear instead of sinking into it. I am in no way, shape, or form an expert. I still miss gears all the time. It happens. I've been driving trucks for 9 years now. I drove an automatic for about 1.5 years with one company I worked for, so I guess it doesn't really count, kinda. But yeah, I don't think it matters how much experience you have. You're still gonna have days where you scrub gears, or at least, you miss a gear or something like that. It happens. In a hurry, you're trying to accelerate too fast, so you're pulling out of gear, you're trying to get into that next gear real quick, and you end up missing the shift. I've had a few times where I'm running through the gears trying to get it, just trying to accelerate a little bit quicker than I should, and I end up jamming the stick against the gear before the engine slowed down enough. The engine RPM has come down enough to where it will actually go into that gear. fuel. Shift. I didn't know if that person better pull out or not. When learning to shift, a lot of people will say, like, when you're coming up to a red light, you want to be in gear in case the light changes or whatever. You want to be in gear so you can start accelerating, which is true. You do. You want to be in that gear. But let's say you're changing gears. You're downshifting, you're changing gears, the light changes, and then for whatever reason, it messes you up to where you miss that shift, and you're like, oh, well, now I can get back into gear and accelerate. Maybe you could go back into the gear that you just came out of, but the RPMs are low. Let's say I'm coming up on a light, I'm about to downshift, and then the light changes, and I let the RPMs drop. Well, now I'm like, oh crap, what gear do I go into? Well, I'm at 37 miles an hour. I know I can go into 8th gear if I rev it up real high, or 9th gear if I rev it up, just a little bit. So I had to go up to 1600 RPM to get it into 8th. And if you mess up and you want to go to 9th would be easier. Rev it up about 1200, it goes right into 9th, and then you can go down to 8th. A lot easier versus just trying to go to 8th gear. And that works with any gear. I'm just using 8th and 9th as an example. But that's why I say it's very important to know what speed or what gear that you want to go into, what speed that gear needs. And of course, I started out double clutching like most other people do. I double clutched for 6 months of my first driving job, because the company I worked for, they wanted you to double clutch. They did not want you to float gears. And since I was fresh out of school and knew how to double clutch and all that, that's all I knew. So that's all I did was double clutch. So for 6 months, just double clutching. I tried double clutching the other day, and I've been floating for so long that I tried double clutching the other day, and I screwed up every single shift. It was horrible. So I'm like, yeah, I'm just gonna stick to what I know. But the same thing could be said for if all you know is double clutching and you try to start floating. Don't get discouraged that you're missing a shift or something. I'm not saying, definitely don't try floating or practice floating while, you know, going down or going up a mountain or something. That's or in heavy traffic. Like, that's not the time to do that. You know, if you wanna practice floating or something like that, find like a country road, or like, let's say you're going down a back road or something, you're going somewhere you have no traffic around you, then you can slow down and just slow down, speed back up or whatever. Just pay attention to what's around you, what's behind you. You know, practice, you know, you gotta practice, get better at it. But with not using the clutch, if you screw something up, there's a lot more that can go wrong. As far as like breaking a tooth off the transmission, or, you know, solder off of a gear, something like that. Watching my feed is my cell phone, and I just know it's going to be really shaky, so I'm sorry about that. Hopefully you're able to get some help, or, you know, or just some knowledge out of this as far as how to up and downshift without using the clutch. I'm not recommending that you do it that way. I recommend you do whatever the manufacturer of the transmission recommends. But yeah, I'm just showing what I do, because working local, I'm not about to double clutch, and I really don't want to go to an automatic truck, which a lot of companies are doing, including ours. I don't want an automatic, so I will stick to manual transmission. It's a lot more work, but it's fun. I enjoy it. It's fun. Especially if you're in bumper-to-bumper traffic or something. And if you know how to time it just right, you don't even have to use the clutch. You can just use, or, you know, as far as you don't even have to stop. So you don't have to sit there and hold the clutch in. You go all the way down to first gear, and you just kind of idle along. Go to fifth gear, fourth gear, and neutral. it.